Today, we are exploring a really fascinating intersection, specifically where natural biology meets top-secret military engineering. I mean, if you've ever been outside, pointed up at a large black bird and asked yourself, wait, is that a crow or a raven? You might actually be surprised to learn that the answer to that exact question has served as the blueprint for decades of modern warfare. I know, it sounds totally wild, but the distinct biological differences between these two birds have literally shaped how our armed forces classify, develop, and deploy some of their absolute most advanced and secretive technologies. Okay, let's dive into this, because to understand the machines, we really have to understand the birds first. You see, for centuries, people have conflated crows and ravens. To the average observer, they're both just large, glossy black birds belonging to the Corvid family, right? And they're both known for their incredible intelligence. But they are entirely distinct species with very, very different behaviors. And as we're going to see today, military engineers and strategists didn't just pick these bird names because they sounded cool. Actually, they perfectly mapped the unique biological and behavioral traits of these animals directly onto their technological counterparts. Section 1. The Biological Divide, Identifying Corvids in the Wild. So just notice the stark physical differences here. First off, the common raven is significantly larger. We're talking often twice the weight of an American crow, actually approaching the size of a red-tailed hawk. And check out the tails. A raven in flight displays this really distinct wedge or diamond-shaped tail, while a crow's tail feathers are all roughly the same length, which means they open up perfectly like a squared-off fan. Finally, if you look at the head, the raven sports this massive, heavy beak covered in these shaggy throat feathers. Compare that to the crow's much slimmer, sleeker profile. But, it's not just about how they look. It's really about how they act. Here is a super helpful auditory hook to remember. R is for raven, C is for crow. Ravens make this low, guttural ruffs, croak, while crows make that very familiar, high-pitched caw. But more importantly for our story today, ravens are highly solitary. They travel alone or maybe in pairs, just soaring high up on thermals. Crows, on the other hand, well, they're intensely communal. They flap their wings a lot more frequently and gather in massive, highly social flocks, which, fun fact, are known as murders. Yet despite these differences, both birds share an uncanny intelligence. We're talking tool use, facial recognition, and really complex problem solving. Now, their naming history is honestly just as tangled as trying to physically identify them. Back in antiquity, the Romans had it clear. Corvus meant raven and cornix meant crow. Simple enough. Then, in 1756, the famous taxonomist Carl Linnaeus formalized the raven as Corvus corax, which literally translates to raven, raven. But by the 1800s, naturalists started getting, a little sloppy. The term corvus broadly morphed into just meaning crow. This essentially made the solitary massive raven a mere subtype of the communal crow in popular scientific vernacular. And this specific historical conflation, it set the stage perfectly for how the military would eventually adopt their names. Section 2. The Corvid Metaphor, where biology meets military engineering. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how flawlessly the military mapped tactical analogies directly to the biology of these birds. Think about it. Because the raven is solitary and specialized in nature, the word raven became the official designation for elite, highly covert, solitary military operations. Meanwhile, because crows are flocking and ubiquitous, crow became the moniker for mass-deployed network defense systems. And that shared high intelligence of both birds, it perfectly mirrors the incredibly complex signal processing and artificial intelligence required for these modern combat systems. It's just a brilliant metaphorical mapping, really. Section 3. The First Ravens, Covert Operators in the Skies. So let's rewind a bit to World War II. The Allies desperately needed to disrupt Axis radars and communications. This was a brand new field known as electronic countermeasures, or ECM. The human operators performing this highly sensitive, highly secret work were given the codename Raven. Why? Well, partly for basic security, for sure, but symbolically, it actually invoked Odin's ravens from Norse mythology, birds that flew across the entire world gathering secret prophetic knowledge. These human ravens deployed their almost magical knowledge of the electromagnetic spectrum to completely blind the enemy. And this elite, solitary tradition didn't stop there. It continued right into the Vietnam era, specifically in the Kingdom of Laos. Here, the ravens were volunteer forward air controllers. Just look at this quote on the slide. Due to international treaties, the ravens were divorced from the USAF. They wore only civilian clothes. These pilots flew really small, slow propeller-driven planes deep, deep into hostile territory. They operated completely covertly to direct strikes against invading forces. Solitary, highly specialized, and deeply secretive. I mean, they were the ultimate embodiment of the biological raven. Section 4, the Old Crows Network, building the flocking community. Okay, so after World War II, those veteran raven operators were sent over to McGuire Air Force Base. Their job was to teach the next generation of electronic warfare officers. And, in a classic display of military humor, the students looked around and realized they were no longer just a few solitary operators. They were a large, rapidly growing community. So they humorously changed their moniker from the solitary ravens to the flocking crows. The knowledge was passed down, and essentially, the flock expanded. And today, that flock is absolutely massive. The Association of Old Crows, or the AOC, is an international professional organization totally dedicated to electronic warfare and electromagnetic spectrum operations. They boast over 12,000 members worldwide. So just like actual crows gathering in large communal roosts, the Old Crows educate, connect, and advocate collectively all across the globe. Section 5. Modern drones and weapons. Flying the Corvid banners today. Let's move to and see how this builds. First up in the modern era is the AeroVironment RQ-11 Raven. This is a small hand-launched drone that weighs just 4.2 pounds. And true to its namesake, it is very much a solitary scout. It provides real-time over-the-hill intelligence and reconnaissance for company-level troops. And it can fly out to 10 kilometers. Really, it's the modern equivalent of that solitary bird soaring on a thermal to silently gather intelligence, all while keeping the human operator safely tucked away out of harm's reach. Now, I want you to contrast that solitary drone with the M153 Crows. That stands for Common Remotely Operated Weapon Station. Remember earlier when we said crows are ubiquitous and communal? Well, the Crows system is exactly that. It is mass deployed across literally thousands of military vehicles globally, dominating the market through the manufacturer Kongsberg. It basically allows a soldier to sit safely inside a heavily armored vehicle while remotely operating a weapon mounted on the roof using a joystick and a screen. It is a mass-fielded defense network that perfectly, and I mean perfectly, embodies the crow metaphor. Section 6. The Future of Corvids, AI, Lasers, and Cyber Convergence. So, looking at all this, we can trace a really direct evolutionary line here. Step 1 was entirely manual, the World War II Ravens physically in the cockpit tuning dials to jam enemy radars. Then, Step 2 brought us remote control, the RQ-11 drone and those CROS joystick systems, which kept the human in the loop but finally got them off the immediate dangerous front line. And now we're entering Step 3. Autonomous guardians. We are rapidly moving towards systems like the EOS Bullfrog that literally operate at machine speed, utilizing incredibly advanced AI to track and target threats way faster than humanly possible. And it's not just the kinetic, shoot-'em-up weapons, it's the electronic ones too. The Association of Old Crows is heavily focused right now on something called cognitive electronic warfare. Basically, this means applying machine learning to the electromagnetic spectrum so these systems can autonomously solve complex jamming problems in real time. Think about that for a second. It's almost a poetic return to the extreme intelligence of actual Corvids out in nature, using highly advanced rapid problem-solving to secure their environment. Which leaves us with a pretty profound thought to wrap up today's explainer. From incredibly simple biological distinctions, like the solitary nature of the raven and the flocking ubiquity of the crow, we have somehow built entire ecosystems of modern defense. So as we push further into an era of artificial intelligence and machine speed lethality, we really have to ask ourselves, how will these ancient birds of prophecy continue to guide the autonomous guardians of tomorrow? It really just goes to show that sometimes the most advanced engineering on the planet is simply trying to catch up to the sheer brilliance of nature. Thanks so much for joining me today, and hey, keep your eyes on the skies.